episode number 182 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Dr. Tara Brandner. Tara works as an experienced doctorate nurse practitioner and fertility coach with patients worldwide. She received additional certification through the American Society of Reproductive Medicine and Marquette Natural Family Planning. After enduring a long road through infertility followed by a traumatic pregnancy, she turned her hurt into hope for others. She formed the first and only nonprofit in North Dakota and South Dakota serving those diagnosed with infertility. She has been the driving force behind legislative efforts since 2019 to increase access to care for infertility and fertility preservation. Tara has expanded her career to providing coaching and telemedicine services that offer a personalized approach to fertility care and pregnancy after infertility. In addition, she offers a wide variety of women's healthcare services provided via telemedicine. She has combined her experiences as a healthcare professional and personal struggle to help navigate couples through their family building path. So welcome to the podcast, Tara.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd love for you to share your story. I know it's a personal one. It's also something that you're really passionate about. I would love to get your background and your personal story and how that tied into what you're doing today.
Yeah. So like many, my story starts with the good old trying for a year. It's not happening. We did have a miscarriage in there. And mine's a little unique because I'm a healthcare provider going through this. And so a lot, if not everything I do, stems from a lot of the missing links and gaps that I saw as a healthcare going through the infertility journey. Places that the medical community can do better, ways that we need to find support and ways to provide support for those going through infertility. And so it began with my miscarriage, and I was met with resistance. We had been trying to conceive for over 6 months at that point. Was nothing indicating that I would have troubles trying to conceive, family history wise or otherwise. And so when that happened, it really got me kind of, thinking and wondering what could be going on. And the healthcare provider that I initially met with when this happened wrote me off, disregarded it. And I went on for 2 months just feeling angsty, like something was wrong. It wasn't right. And I reached back out to my primary OBGYN, and she acknowledged it and was like, we're done. It's time for you to go see reproductive endocrinology, and immediately sent me on to that next step.
So this is point, after the miscarriage, and
yes.
Then you had spoken to a different OB than your primary?
Yeah, it was actually a physician's assistant that works within their healthcare system. It's like their process and way they communicate. You meet with them, and she was like, "Well, I mean, she had made a comment that is so hard for me to kind of talk about to this day, but she made a comment in regards like, when you're crazy enough, reach back out and let me know you're ready." Because where I live is 120 miles one way. So like, for example, she was saying, if I wanted any treatments, IUIs or orals or anything like that, well, you're going to have to drive. And why don't you just wait till you're crazy enough and let me know? And I had been in counseling for a miscarriage at that point. And so it was just taken aback by like how I was treated and wrote off.
Yeah.
And like, I'm well aware how far I have to drive. Like, that's something that we all know when you don't live in a city, that's part of the consideration.
Right.
Because I kind of asked like, what's the next step, or what can I be doing, anything? And then that's when she had made that comment. And I waited a while to reach back out to my OB because I figured, okay, like maybe it's not time. And I had all these things going through my head. And when I told her that, she's like, I'm so sorry, we're done. Like, there's no need for you to be in this, clinic anymore, especially with that. You're not doing any of that treatment here. It's not going to work. Let's just get you right into reproductive if you're going to do IUIs and skip the OB clinic part of it. And I had not been open about my journey. I had shared with nobody, and I had a job. My job includes being on call and ER rotations. And so I had really been struggling with that behind the scenes. We're short staffed to make it work and to get out of clinic unexpectedly based on my cycle.
Yeah.
And it was when we started IUI, and I was basically forced to open up about my journey because I couldn't hide it anymore with why I needed off and that kind of thing. And I opened up about it. And here I found out the entire time in my 6-person clinic, my secretary was going through the exact same thing.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, if I just had been open about it sooner, her and I would have had each other sooner in this whole situation. And so we failed 3 rounds of IUI, and we took a break at that point. We were exhausted. That 3rd round of IUI, I always joke I could write a book on. I was giving my trigger shot with a tornado siren going off in our basement.
Oh my
God. I wasn't going to miss that shot or the time,
Yeah.
And so we took a break, and I actually had it previously scheduled. It was perfect timing. We were considering switching clinics. We were doing some research, talking to those that we knew. I have a family friend that works in a clinic and as an embryologist in another state. So he really taught me a lot about fertility and statistics and clinic researching and what makes, IVF successful. It's not just your doctor, not just your protocol, it's the lab and all of these things. And I completed a month-long health policy fellowship in Washington, D.C. with the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. And little did I know how that would help me in the future as I initiated legislation to advocate for access to infertility benefits and fertility preservation benefits, which I've done now since 2019. And so it was perfect time to take a break. When I came back, we started with a new clinic and ended up doing IVF. Was there prior to that, I was unexplained infertility, which blew my mind as a healthcare provider. Like, I don't get to just list something. Oh, no, sorry. Like unexplained, I don't get to do that. And so it was hard for me to understand, how could they not have an answer, when we've done so many different things at this point. And it was at that new clinic I received the diagnosis of endometriosis. And so I've become extremely passionate about helping patients through that. And it's, it takes 7 to 12 years to get that diagnosis, which to me is also just crazy and unacceptable as a healthcare provider to dismiss patients and not know for that long. And so we treated that, totally changed my protocol. Went in at a lower protocol. I wasn't he didn't stim me too high, and we ended up with 2 embryos. Genetically tested the whole thing. And we have one, he's 4 now. So we had one of those embryos took and one didn't, which was a whole nother grieving and emotional piece that I feel maybe isn't talked about enough either. Like, to me, that was a loss. And it was hard for me to get fully excited about my pregnancy. And so I felt weird and awkward and just confused about my grieving process at that time. And to the point that my OB was amazing. She's been through infertility. So I think if you can find an OBGYN that's been through infertility, that's a unicorn and it's a gem in itself. Yeah. And she's like, if you want to go to a different clinic and get an ultrasound, let's just order it there. Cause I didn't feel like, I'm like, did you miss it? Like, could that, embryo still be there? Cause she had the first ultrasound tech made some comment about like, oh, you look constipated, which confused me from an ultrasound perspective. But I was like, maybe she missed it because I was constipated. So did all the things to become unconstipated, then went got another thing. And they're like, oh, there's one healthy baby in here. Yay. And I was like, yay. And I went and cried. And so a lot of what I do too now is help women with pregnancy after infertility, because it's so different. And there's just so much emotionally and mentally that goes along with that too, that I was just like on an island with. And so pregnancy progressed. I did have frequent monitoring from the beginning. And then at 32 weeks, and having a bleed where I was helicoptered and had to live away from my home, which was 120 miles from my OB, and for 4 weeks. And so that was a whole other level too of trauma. Everything was fine and great, which was wonderful. And at 39 weeks, we had an emergency C-section, which was a whole nother trauma. So it was just like all these things kind of stacking up. And it was after I was like holding my son. I remember he was 6 weeks. I was like, what did we just go through? Like, from the no insurance coverage of the disease of infertility and into just the emotional aspect of pregnancy after, and the trauma that pursued with that, it was just eye-opening to me. Like, what if this happened to us? What are others going through? And that was how it started. With I began by just initiating legislation, and I soon found there was no nonprofits, no organizations to support those in North Dakota, South Dakota, the area where I live, going through it. So I was like, how do I start a nonprofit? I guess, like, this feels right. And so since 2019, I've had the first and only infertility nonprofit in North Dakota, South Dakota. We do a lot of grant support. We do care packages. We do advocacy work. And then about a year and a half ago, I was like, just not feeling fulfilled at my job anymore. I felt like I could be helping people through women's health and reproductive in a different way. And so that's how I became a fertility coach. And I have a women's health and fertility telemedicine business as well. That's 3 states right now. And then the fertility coach is for anybody. But I just feel, as a healthcare provider, there's just so much work that needs to be done around this disease and changing it and things like that, that I felt like I could have a space in helping with that.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot of really good, important points. Is that sometimes when you're going through it, it's kind of like you don't really know where your place is or how to grieve and how to work out these emotions, because it's not like, a lot of times it's you're going through this alone. Like, you don't have other people. You had mentioned that you had somebody at your office where you were working that was going through it, but you didn't even know it, and you didn't know it from each other, and you would have helped each other. And it's such a different type of navigation of emotions than really anything.
It truly is. And the amount of burden that gets placed on a patient, like researching and Googling and comparing, is just debilitating in itself.
Yeah.
And it's like, I say my reproductive patients are some of the most well-versed and educated people than any other disease I see or patients I see. But that's because
Yes.
we've almost had to. Like, we have to do the work, because it's almost like, I keep saying, it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall to some extent when it comes to treating this disease. And we know intuitively and individually something's going on, and I'm not being heard most of the time.
Yep.
And so you're out looking for, well, what do I need? What are others doing? And you're comparing, and you just have this full-time job of having infertility on top of your other life issues and aspects and day-to-day routine things going on. And it's just really hard to navigate. And I can't, I sat there, I was like, well, I have some of this knowledge, right? Like, as a person in the healthcare field, or, that I have a little bit of an advantage. I can't imagine what, how many people haven't made it this far because they didn't know things, or they didn't feel they could speak up. They felt, silenced or overlooked. And so that's a lot of what I try to do, is really encourage patients to never override that intuition and advocate for themselves in the clinic, find different healthcare providers, get second opinions,
Yes.
and really advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. And it's just like anything. When you have healthcare providers, I think it's important to realize they're human, and there are humans that are a lot more compassionate, and there are humans that are not, and there are humans that are a lot more insightful, and then there are ones that are not. It doesn't matter that they have all the letters besides their names. That doesn't mean as much as it seems at first. They could be wrong. And it's really important, like you said, to really tune into your heart, because ultimately something within yourself tells you something's not right. Like, you're misdiagnosed, or I'm just not getting the answer that I know is there.
Absolutely. 100%. I always say too, like, let's say you've been with someone for a while and you feel really tied to them. You owe them nothing. They're not at your family reunions. You're not going to see them, more than likely. Some may, at a street fair or an event or something. And if you do, just know it's very common in the healthcare field and any specialty to switch providers and get second opinions. I also see in the reproductive space, we feel so tied sometimes to one person, one clinic, that I want people to give themselves permission to look outside of that and really consider they are not all made equally, like you said. Just because it's a reproductive clinic doesn't mean they are doing what the other next 5 are. They all do things differently.
Yeah.
And for some, one thing's important, like bedside manner. And that may change too. Like person, you don't care. Like I just want this person's brain because, they have, they're really good or they specialize in something or some areas. So to really, if you're going to do some homework, do it on that and consider that over, comparing even protocols and things like that. It's hard to not do sometimes, but to really find a place and a person that fits your needs and hears you and listens to you.
Yeah. I remember seeing, and I don't remember the details, but there was like a study done on if a doctor believes that their patients are going to do well, or if they believe in their patient's progress, the patient will do better. And it's crazy, but you do see some doctors that are more optimistic, more hopeful, which I think helps. Obviously, you want them to be qualified, absolutely, but there is definitely a benefit to having somebody who really believes in you. Whereas sometimes I think they want to be what's quote unquote realistic and they don't want you to be disappointed and they want to give you sort of like the reality. But sometimes that is just based on a snapshot and like a misdiagnosis or something that's not quite seen correctly. And it could be detrimental really to your own belief system and your own journey.
Yes. And delay
Yeah.
progress for you
Yeah.
ultimately too. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it's important to shop around for sure when it comes to that. And I
Yes.
have seen it actually with my own patients where when they switch doctors, everything changes.
Yes. I have too. And I tell people too, don't be scared to travel. Like for some that might
That's
not
right.
be possible, but if you think of how much you might invest out of pocket, especially, or even utilizing your insurance money, if you have that, how much you're going to invest when you have to redo, or it goes
Yep.
missed
Yeah.
versus the cost of travel and making it work that way. Really consider it. Really consider it.
So what is the legislature that you were working on? What was that? I don't understand that whole part,
Yeah.
but it's really interesting and I'm actually like I really admire it. I admire that you have the courage and you have the strength and energy to do that.
Yeah. So it ultimately is mandating insurance coverage when you have the diagnosis of infertility to provide testing and treatment in addition to fertility preservation, which I think like over 90% of that is cancer patients.
Hmm.
Because as we all know, there isn't insurance coverage. And if there is, it's very minimal. I know some businesses are changing that and keeping up to date with the, switching to rounds or giving more of an allotted amount. But there's so much work that needs to be done in this space because it's not enough. And then once again, it is the only disease that has, once you get the diagnosis of this disease, it doesn't have insurance coverage. And if you go and look at a lot of insurance policies, you'll have lists like what's not covered, and it's cosmetics, plastic surgery like stuff, non-FDA approved medicines and medical devices, and infertility. But
Wow.
infertility is categorized and in fact a disease.
Right.
And so it literally is the only thing hanging out there, that's acknowledged by
And
many
most of the
medical.
time, it's not just infertility, it's
Yeah,
PCOS or
right.
endometriosis or fibroids, or, there's so many other things unexplained. A lot of times, there's always an explanation.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I want people to really understand how much power they have with little information. Like I don't do politics. I don't understand that you don't need it. We need your story. Like we
Hmm.
just need, whenever that time comes, if it comes, because for some it's really hard to share. But if the time comes, if you're even willing, I say as simple as a paragraph.
Hmm.
We need to find those doing these efforts in your state and connect you with them. And if it's not happening in your state, I will help you make it happen. I work with national organizations. Is how I kind of got started and have been going through it to help kind of get things going. But then I was just a constituent living in my town. And I started by reaching out to my legislators, the one they work for you. So remember,
Hmm.
just like your doctors work for you, so do your legislators. So maybe that help offset some of the scariness. Like they're there to work for you. And that means for this disease that is not covered by insurance companies. It is
Right.
not right that insurance companies don't cover this. And so I just reach out to mine. They help point me. Every state does things a little bit differently. Mine only meets every other year. Some states meet yearly, but you don't have to know the process. You have to just get connected with the right groups doing the work or the right person doing the work in your state. And they will help tell you exactly what needs to come next. And the easiest story I have on that is this last session, it came down to the hour before our bill was going to be heard on the House floor. And I had patients texting and emailing their legislators that hour before and flip them from red to green. And that is, I want patients to always understand their voice is more powerful than anybody, any organization, or any doctor, anybody else reaching out on behalf of you, your story, because you vote for them and they know that. So if you just say, I'm a constituent in your district, that right there alone is superhuman power like stuff to say. And we had them flip, and we more than doubled our support from the year before. And so it can be slow and it's frustrating. But the thing I say to that is, like, everything in politics is slow. I do a lot of work for advocacy for nurse practitioners at the state national level. There's something we've been trying to pass since the 90s. It still hasn't passed. And I hope to all of the above that this is not that, but like the louder our voices are together and we unify that by every state at the federal level every year, and we partner with organizations and people doing this work, we will be heard. And so even if somebody's listening and they have went through infertility, I also encourage them to speak out, because you can speak out on behalf of, I have friends and family going through this. And that is a very powerful thing too, because you see the side of us that is hurting and going through all of this. And especially those that are still going through treatment, it can be really hard to open up about it, as we know. But to just speak out on behalf of those, we all go to events and things to support other diseases and on behalf of, and show, this community support. This is the same thing when it comes to just sharing and writing and following call to actions as they become made available in your state you're living in.
Yeah, and I think that the bottom line is I don't think a lot of people know that they can do this. I
Yes,
mean,
you are
I'm learning a
correct.
lot just listening to you, because to me it was very foreign. You really don't know like how. It just doesn't seem like it's possible. It seems kind of like something you just see on TV.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of tied with some icky things. If you hear the word legislation and politics, you kind of instantly get like, it's not a warm, fuzzy, let's go do this, rah, 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 right away. It's kind of intimidating. But from what I have seen, and I get goosebumps and half teary-eyed, I talk about it. When I've pulled together, usually we have about 5 people testify per hearing, which there can be multiple hearings in a session. The way they feel afterwards and how they describe how empowering it is,
Yeah.
and just how it changes their lives, and it provides healing for them and hope for others, and how powerful it was for them to speak on behalf of other couples and women going through this,
Hmm.
life-changing for them.
Yeah.
And so it might be one of the scariest or bravest things to date that you may step out to do. And that includes typing your story, because we compile written, every state will do written and verbal
Hmm.
testimony. And so just to really consider it, because it'll validate what you've been through. You'll
Hmm.
feel really heard at the end of it. And you might even find healing. You might cry. I always warn people, you'll probably cry when you start typing in this out as you prepare. And that's normal. That's good.
Yeah.
Like, let it out. Don't hold that in. Just know it'll probably happen. I don't know if I've had one person say they haven't cried when they're starting to prepare afterwards, like this sense of relief and healing. That's just, some healing happening. And so it
Hmm.
really is a positive, life-changing experience
Yeah,
to be part of.
cathartic for sure. And what have you seen happen so far? I mean, I know it moves slow. What have you seen happen so far?
I have seen awareness. I had no clue. I had no clue that this is how it was. I have changed a lot of thoughts in how people, okay, so this is what we'll hear. We'll go adopt, really changing the conversation around the hurtfulness of that topic and
Yeah.
why that's not possible. That's expensive as well. It's not our job as the infertiles to go adopt all the kids. Why don't you go adopt a child, even like have 4-year old, go for it. Like, kind of just like,
It's
I
those
get
insensitive
really,
comments. Yeah,
it
that
is, I
just
get
kind of,
really bold. And I've gotten really spicy over the years. It's like, stop. Like, I stop them right then and there and say, please don't say that to people. And here's why.
hmm
Um, Insurance companies, if they hear my name locally, they'll probably cringe a little because I work with the insurance commissioner to make sure that they're having conversations and meeting with me outside of legislation.
hmm
It's huge. They are the ones that are ultimately holding back on this.
hmm
And I've been really frustrated by, they just see dollar signs, and it's just frustrating to me
It's crazy
to,
how healthcare has to hinge
yeah,
on that.
yeah, exactly. And businesses, I've worked a lot with having conversations on the outside with employers. And if I do have patients that are willing to speak up, maybe in the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, went through infertility, really empowering them to step in and help. We need you. You're in a better place than those that are taking shots currently and going through it. Can you please work with us to, like, who's your HR contact? Let's work together on getting them during open enrollment to change plans to include infertility. And so it's things like that, um, that we're also doing in between that are really powerful too.
So have you seen any changes being made?
Yes. So we have one of the major um, hospital systems, and they have their own insurance plan, has opened the conversation with a company that offers infertility benefits, like to add that for their plans. And so they are running numbers and working with numbers. That's probably like one of the coolest things. It's super slow. They're supposed to have it done, of course, this year, and now they're pushing it off again. So I was super
hmm
frustrated by that. But I've been able to do presentations with one of the other major insurance companies to their
hmm
entire marketing department once a year. I go in and educate their marketing department on how to speak to employers and businesses when open enrollment comes around, to have this conversation and put it at the forefront of their mind when they're marketing, to add it that way. Um, I've had some businesses, once again, it's like I do that a lot for the nonprofit. It's slow, but to like collaborate with businesses that already have it or have made the change, to share why and how it hasn't exponentially increased, if at all,
hmm
their cost. There's
Right.
cost savings. There's research that shows it's cost savings to add this. And so really trying to hone in and dig that message in. But we've had conversations with, we were going to put together, of course, then things kind of shut down for a while, but an event where we had businesses and healthcare providers serving the infertility community, insurance companies, all at the table, and legislators at the table together to talk about this. And so
hmm
that's something that we are still working on at the state level here in North Dakota, to really make that change and that connection and shift to that. So yes, we're going to do legislation every year until this is done, but we're also going to keep conversations rolling on the outside, because a lot of these insurance companies have false information, whether they by choice are choosing to utilize that false information. But then we have to also watch for bills that could harm infertility too. I work with South Dakota a lot. They have a lot of bills that would make surrogacy illegal. And so it's an ongoing thing to
hmm
watch when you do have that knowledge and background on how to watch what's coming through the pipeline that could
Why would they do
hurt.
that?
Oh, the $1 million question. What I've seen is just mind blowing. When
Wow.
the it, it's organizations that have money that don't believe in infertility treatment, and they will do anything at any expense to say they're pro-life, but to shut down any medical means or method that families with infertility have to grow their families. And it's devastating and heartbreaking to
Oh
see
my
still
God.
happening
Wow.
in 2022.
Yeah. That is crazy, crazy,
Yeah,
crazy.
it's, you would think, since, like, for example, using North Dakota and South Dakota, we're neighbors and pretty similar in many ways, but how different we actually are when it comes to the legislation and picture of what we're working towards and how we're working to advance. North Dakota is by far more amazing when it comes to that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Amazing. And so, so now the kind of work that you do, I mean, it sounds like you really advocate for your clients, and you do fertility coaching and telemedicine. So you use your license and your healthcare to help people going through the fertility journey.
Yeah. So I saw about a year and a half ago, it's kind of, I still had my account from when I was going through infertility, and I saw these fertility coaches come into, I'm like, well, this is interesting. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that makes me stand apart is my background in education that I have as a doctorate nurse practitioner. I have advanced training from ASRM, American Society of Reproductive Medicine, and I even went and got my Marquette Natural Family Method training to be able to better understand and provide care at that level as well, and to really just see the full picture of conception from all different views and ways and that kind of thing. And so I really felt there was a need for someone like me to step into that space as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it began with the coaching business, which is worldwide essentially. And I kind of take an approach to just help people better understand what they're going through and what their options are, because that was the one thing that really shifted and pivoted my success, was this awareness and understanding and the reality, and understanding success rates, understanding the difference in clinics, understanding supplements, and just different things that kind of go into, versus going and Googling and reading discussion groups and comparing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the telemedicine is actually where I can work as my nurse practitioner with a nurse practitioner hat on. I can accept insurance, and I really focus on the disease or symptoms they have that is likely or is leading to their infertility.
Right.
And so I work alongside their healthcare team in all both these sectors and businesses. But it's really walking beside the patient, meeting them where they're at, listening, and ultimately most of the time it's just being their fertility friend who's there to listen to them when they need to vent or have had loss or failure, or they don't feel heard, and just really helping them feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been amazing. It with my telemedicine, even a lot of it is not just infertility, but it's like girls in high school or college that have symptoms. PCOS is like hands down the number one, I think, thing I see is PCOS. And they're like, I don't want birth control. And I went to 3 providers. That's all I'm being offered. I was like, you've come to the right place. Let's talk, and they get like a PowerPoint. They get 45 to 60 plus minutes with me on their first visit. We really do a full intake. I do a whole presentation for them to help them better understand every piece of it. And then we move forward with the plan and really help focus in on the symptom management, helping them understand that this is a lifelong disease. And then I even have the other side of it, where perhaps the female is done having children, but still has symptoms of painful period or PCOS symptoms. And it's stepping back and working with them too, to get their hormones balanced and to kind of look things at a deeper level, to set them up with a plan that's going to help offset, versus once again, just putting them on prescription medications. And I do prescribe often, if that's what they need and do, there's a place for that. But there's other things in addition to just a prescription medication that's needed with all of these diseases.
Yeah.
Endometriosis is the other big one, because that was my big one, to really stop taking uteruses out and doing hysterectomies, not resolving a lot of endo last time I checked. And so it's just changing a lot of what we do with that, really getting them, I have 4 girls that are seeing excision surgeons right now, and they had no clue. One of them was 21 and had a hysterectomy, and it totally took away her ability to have her own children. That's devastating.
Just reckless. Unless you absolutely have to. That's reckless.
100%. And so I've really, trying to just educate patients right off the bat, stop with the hysterectomies and stop with these ablations and things, let's do some other things. And letting them know what other services and other healthcare providers, such as pelvic floor physical therapy, exist out
Yep.
there to help them with their
Totally.
symptom management.
Totally. You really don't feel like you have choice. And I know this just personally because that I probably had undiagnosed PCOS and I was given the birth control over and over. It was just like constant. Every time I went to the doctor, that was the only option to get a monthly bleed. It
Yep.
wasn't even a period. It was a monthly bleed. And that was the only option. I didn't really know I had a choice.
Right.
And then when I just discovered an acupuncturist who regulated me. That was like the one thing that helped me personally, but not knowing you have a choice. And then also like in my later years, I had fibroids. It runs in my family, and 2 times was told I should get a hysterectomy. 2 times, 2 different doctors. And I finally kept looking. If I wouldn't have kept looking, I wouldn't have known that I had a choice. And then I
Yes.
found out, that you can get like the interventional, what is it, interventional radiologist,
Yes.
where they do the embolization. Basically, I mean, that was the choice. I kept my uterus and I'm still having my periods but it's at first you really, if you go and you're given an opinion, you really don't know that you have a choice, and that's why it's so important to have an advocate that knows how to navigate this world.
Absolutely. And you hit so many good points right there in one section, because I always start with, when I meet with my patients, I just want to tell you how amazing you are and how brave you are for following that intuition
Hmm.
and reaching out to me. Because usually I'm like the third, fourth, fifth provider,
Yeah.
that they've seen that you have followed that internal intuition feeling
Hmm.
to keep seeking answers and to not just feel not heard and go with the flow with what they're saying, because it's really hard to do, right? Like, they're
It's really hard
doctors
to
and they
do.
they
Yeah.
they know what they're doing, right? Like, and then they can even fight you
Eh,
with a little resistance too,
Well,
if you,
that's
heaven
it.
forbid, you try to
That's
speak
it.
out.
You ask a question and then you feel, there's no stupid question. You feel like every question you have is stupid
Yes.
with the
Yes.
expression that you get back.
Yes. And I really try to just say, really, with me, there's no silly questions. Like,
Yeah.
and I really open the door, like, anytime. And when I respond back, I'm like, let me know if you have any more questions. Do you have any other questions? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of rewiring their brain, because they're so like,
To feel safe.
yeah, to feel safe and to just know that I'm a safe place for them to be and feel heard. And literally, I can't tell you how many times I've got off a telemedicine, not a lot of coaching business, and they're just like, wow, thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
Like, I just finally feel heard, which
Hmm.
tells me
It's
the
so
healthcare
healing too.
system is like failing people left and right when it comes to this. And I get it, right? They're being pushed with numbers and
Mhm.
revenue and all of that. But at what point do we need to like change? That's a whole nother battle to fight. But
Yeah.
then bring someone like me in to,
Mhm.
there's there to help and to assist and to provide more time and education, because I can do that. Um, and just think of it differently. And I really want to, when I go out and share with other healthcare professionals what I do, I try to say I'm changing how we view this disease and creating a multidisciplinary healthcare approach to reproductive health and women's health in general. And I compare it to diabetes, because a lot of them will understand, when you're diabetic, you get a whole healthcare team, a podiatrist, a nutritionist, a nurse, your primary provider, your endocrinologist, like, you get this whole squad working for you. Why can't we do that for reproductive? Because
Hmm.
that's where it's actually needed really bad. You need mental
Yeah.
health, and patients are creating this on their own. And so when you close
They're
patients down and
figuring
say,
it out on
that's,
their own.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And you're like closed off to it, and that supplement won't work, and there's no study to back that. You are doing a disservice to you, because they're going to leave you. They will find someone, hopefully, or get a second opinion
Hmm.
and move on to somebody who's open to it. You may not have to understand it. You can just say, you know what, I'm not really sure. Let's find someone who understands that and bring them into our team, and really just shift that little shift, this really
Yeah.
teeny tiny shift can move mountains for patients and for you as a healthcare professional too.
Totally. Totally. I mean, it really comes down to that whole phrase of patient-centered care. Like, it really is about the patient.
Yes. Yes. I'm like shaking my yes, like 100%. That like what if you're gonna provide and offer and follow that, then let's do it. Because it's not happening in this space. It's just not.
Yeah. And it's definitely a systemic thing. It's the training. There's training that is taught to really see it in one direction. For me, the eye opener for me was when my whole issue with the period and not really having an answer and going to once, twice, three times every medical visit I had the same answer because that's how they're trained. And then being told that there's no cure for what you have. Well, guess what? I mean, I was cured. After I found the right treatment, I was cured. I
Yes.
mean, it was really like that was it.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. You're 100% right. And that's the same when I said with endometriosis. The approach that's being taken traditionally, if I don't know if that's even the right term for it, is not actually following the golden standard. Excision, for example, that's what that is excision surgery. And there's
Yes.
not a lot of doctors that are doing it. So these providers that are going in, it takes a real special eye. Like, just say, you know what, it's not my area. Like, it's okay. Let's
Yeah.
find someone who is.
Yep.
And when I hear people say I've had surgery for it, I'm like, tell me that it is excision, because they're thinking ablation is a surgery, and that's not at all it. It actually
Right.
can create more problems. And so I see what you just said to echo that a lot with like endometriosis too.
Hmm.
Excision can, in fact, cure and help a lot of the symptoms.
Yeah, that, and also if you want to look at a functional medicine, if you think about like the full team, that helps a lot
Yes.
too. Really understanding the
Yes.
gut connection with endometriosis and going to the root cause so that, yeah, you're fixing what's already manifested and you're also treating the root cause so that it doesn't continue. There's so many, I mean, we are
Absolutely.
this whole person. And that's why I
Yes.
think having a team is so important. Really having so many different perspectives to treat you, one person,
Yes.
one whole person.
And if your healthcare provider is not willing to do it for you, do it yourself. You are in control of your healthcare. They work for you. You're
Hmm.
hiring them, essentially, is what you're doing. So
Yeah.
don't feel so committed or dedicated or stuck with them.
Hmm.
Make your own, create your own healthcare team.
Such a good point, and it's such a good reminder too, because sometimes I think when you're in it, you feel like you have this relationship and you almost feel like you owe them something, but it's your health at the end of the day. You're the one who has to go to bed knowing
Yes.
that, either the treatment aligned or didn't align with you.
Yes. I see it too often. And I'm like, remember, you're not going to see him at family Christmas or
Yep.
at your community event. And if you do, it happens all the time in other aspects of healthcare where you get a second opinion, you switch providers. Like,
That's right.
it's not an uncommon thing. It's scary and feels uncomfortable for some, but I really like to empower people. Please do it. Like,
Yes.
go find someone else or just get a second opinion. Sometimes that's all it's needed. And you might stick with the person or find a new person or a third or fourth opinion. I always hear people saying too, do
That's
the
right. That's right. It
interview
doesn't have,
them.
yeah,
Yeah, go
exactly.
find a provider and interview them.
Yeah, and without a doubt, it can really make or break the journey. It really makes such a difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So, if people want to work with you, how can they find you and what do you offer? Well, we already talked about what you offer. You do telemedicine and coaching.
Yes. So you can find me at terabfertility.com and on Instagram, terabfertility. I do put out a little podcast every week. It's really short, 5, 10, 15 minutes. I'm trying to provide some quick, not only hopeful inspiration, but like educational tips, hopeful hints and infertility podcasts. But I try to do a lot on Instagram as well. And my inbox is always open. My website has a chat feature. You're always getting me behind that too, and to just really try to encourage and create a safe space to drop in and run something even by me really quick, or just share what's on your heart and know it's a safe person to connect with when you're going through this. And I'm really open. I'm not going to judge, that kind of thing too.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for coming on. I think that what you just shared today is extremely empowering for anybody going through the fertility journey. And I can feel your passion. I know that you feel it like on the inside out, your own personal journey. And I really admire your courage in really taking charge on this issue and your contribution to the community. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.